Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mark's Dialogue. Very excited to be moderating this conversation with Ahmed and Cindy. As always, I will not do very in-depth introductions because I do believe that people best introduce themselves. And because of that, I will just start with a little bit of housekeeping. So please try as much as possible to keep your mics just so that we can have that conversation with our guests and that there won't be any disturbances. If you happen to have a question, please pop it in the chat or raise your hand. Or as always, you can put a few stars in the chat, just like this, just like that. If you have a question, I will see that as a question, and then I will give you the floor. We always practice the rule of two. So if you do have a contribution or you have something that you want to say, please wait for one other person or two other people to speak before it's your turn to speak again. This just makes sure that all of us are having the same conversation or in the same, feel heard, which is incredible. And yeah, I'm very excited to be moderating the dialogue today. And if you were part of the workshops, I don't know if we can all see my screen.
We can see it.
Awesome. We can see where it says climate solutions in the global south. I hope. The theme for March has been looking at climate solutions in the global south. And on Monday, we looked at what this could look like. We looked at a couple of case studies. We looked at one specific case study that was in Uganda that may be our reference if the conversation goes that way. But the goal is to properly sort of have these conversations around what climate solutions look like in our context. And of course, the majority of us are in Africa. And so that's why one of the key case studies that we looked at on Monday looked at a solution that is happening in Uganda. I will speak about it a little bit as we go. Because I do know that case study ties in a little bit into what Ahmed does, which is exciting. So we looked at building capacity for community-driven climate solutions, and we looked at what building capacity was. We looked at what community-driven climate solutions were. We looked at climate solutions. We looked at what we could do within our context to make sure that when we're implementing something or when we're finding support for the actions that we want to do, it would be there and it would be relevant. And for today, we then want to have this discussion with Cindy and Ahmed around strategies for developing and implementing climate solutions, right? And then we're going to see what this sounds like in practice, because it's one thing to look at a case study, but it's another thing to hear a practitioner speak about their experiences around these strategies for developing and implementing climate solutions. So that's what today's conversation is going to be about. And I am going to start by not sharing my screen anymore and asking Cindy, coming to you and asking you to please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for organizing this dialogue. It's always timely to have this discussion. As Michelle has said, my name is Cindy Kobe. I'm from Kenya, and I come from the indigenous community of the Ogek. They're called the Ogek peoples, and we live. Our ancestral home is the Mau Forest. And I am a lawyer by profession. I have a background in law and indigenous people's rights, and also I've been working in the climate space, biodiversity as well, and working with women, indigenous communities, and young people. I'm currently I wear several hats. I'm the co-founder of Tirap Youth Trust, which is an indigenous youth organization working with indigenous communities, specifically my community, the Ogek peoples, to rehabilitate our ancestral home and to also restore it to its natural state. And we're especially working with young girls. So we have a specific focus on young girls because they are the foundation of the communities. They're the ones who are going to carry down this knowledge. And we also have a specific focus on our indigenous knowledge and ensuring that we are transferring this and documenting it and encouraging people to practice the things that they used to do before everything happened. So we are going back to our roots. We are reconnecting with our lands and our creators. And on top of that, I'm also an Indigenous Woman Climate Policy Fellow at Conservation International, and in there I support the implementation of a project which is on the biggest topic, which of carbon markets. So we are working on and building capacities of communities to engage in this space. What about the space? What is going on in the space? How can we benefit? And we are trying to ensure that at the end of the day, the carbon market is not going anywhere, and we have to ensure that we know what is happening and how we can benefit the process and the technicalities. So that's my role at Conservation International, and I'm also working at FSC Indigenous Foundation, which is a global Indigenous peoples organization, working with implementing partners to ensure that we are building our capacities. There's political advocacy. There's also the issues of economic empowerment, and we work in various parts across Africa. We are working in South Africa. We are working in Central Africa, and we have a partner in Kenya. So the work that we do is mostly with our partners, and yeah, and I think that's just a brief of the work that we do, and I think I'll feed into it as we proceed. Thank you, Michelle.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for that. I don't think I could have done that justice. So thank you for doing your own personal introduction that much justice. It makes me very, very excited. And I don't know if anyone else caught it, but Cindy was throwing around, implementing and strategies and the words that are literally within the title that we're going to be discussing today. So I'm really just that excited. I'll come to you, Ahmed. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Sambonani. Nice to meet you all. Thank you, Cindy. Nice to hear your story as well. Super interesting. And also so nice to see so many interesting people from all across the continent joining. I see Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, Malawi. It really excites me to be speaking to all of you this evening. I feel very honored. Thanks for having me, Michelle, and the ACA. So my name is Ahmad. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. And my background is in international relations and transitional justice and human rights. And I'm the founder of an organization here in Cape Town called Mzansi Organics that we started in lockdown in response to climate action and food security. And it was really, I think, during lockdown that really pushed me to come up with these solutions that are much more tangible, and things. How do we move away from the textbook? How do we move away from all the talk, and how do we really position ourselves in a way for action? And so we've been working very closely with Indigenous communities and local communities over the last few years. So we started since 2020, and we're consulting communities and growing food and growing trees. And one of the things that we do very passionately is that we set up urban forests, indigenous urban forests. We also set up food forests as well. We strongly believe in this as a climate change solution. Specifically, how do we rewild our urban spaces? How do we create little pockets around the city that is conducive for wildlife to thrive? And by planting indigenous trees and so on, it really creates the space not only where very specific birds want to come, but they also want to come and make their nests, and the butterflies want to lay their eggs, etc. And we have this whole ecosystem chain effect of how this ecosystem in the forest that we have set up are really starting to grow and starting to build. And yeah, we really do our best to empower the communities that we work with. We do our best to take a grassroots approach, so to say, centering around the community members, of which I will get into much more detail a little bit later. So that's the little introduction from me, and happy to be here with all of you this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction as well. I think my excitement just continues to grow because, like, I feel like I'll keep saying it, so I'm going to stop. But it is very, very exciting to kind of hear your stories, especially around kind of like an introduction around how you got into the space and the work that you are already doing, even though we're only hearing a glimpse, the work that's happening around developing climate solutions. And I quite like when you said moving away from the talk and moving more toward that implementing. It's great because we are then able to see what that can look like realistically within our communities or within our contexts. And I think that's one question that I have had is how do we come up with climate solutions in urban spaces? Because sometimes when people do have these conversations, it's about outside somewhere where there's like vast amounts of land and people are like renewable energy. And when they say renewable energy, they're really talking about solar. And then when they're talking about solar and solar panels, we're talking about this big open space where people can then go and just set up these things. And so it's always accessible or that it can be visualized. And it's not a lot of people who can visualize it. So I quite like how it sounds very feasible. It sounds relatable. It sounds like every person or any other everyday person can understand where you two come from. So that's very exciting for me. So yeah, I mean, a part of the goal of the discussion is to try and highlight the valuable contributions that communities in the global south, and in our case today in Africa, because both of you are in Africa. So communities across the African continent are addressing climate change, or the work that you both have been involved in when it comes to creating these climate solutions and implementing them. And so yeah, we are going to get started. You know, the first question is almost always tell us a bit about yourself. But I think we've heard a little bit about yourselves. So could you tell us how you got into the work that you do? I will start with you, Cindy.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a very good question, because most of the time we need to ask ourselves why we're doing what we are doing. And how I got into this space is that I saw when I was growing, as I said, I come from the Ogek indigenous community. And as I was growing up, I have seen my community being evicted from their ancestral lands. I've seen my relatives being victims of injustices, land injustices. I have also seen this is when I was around 10, 11, and I used to see. I have seen when I was growing up. I used to see that we used to go to my grandmother's place. My grandmother, there was a very big forest. We literally live inside the forest. So as a result of the evictions, we had to move outside because it was gazetted as for conservation. And once the move, we would see the forest was there, but as the years went by, I saw it degraded. I saw communities encroach the forest. I have seen the trees being cut down. I have seen my relatives being homeless. Some are still homeless to date. They are now living as squatters elsewhere, or they even moved to a totally different place that is not even close to home. And as a result of that, I decided that I'm going to be a champion for justice, and and I decided to go to law school. So I went to law school, and I thought, I wouldn't say I thought, but I'm hoping that the courts would, I would try, I would get justice from through the court system. But unfortunately, it's the court systems, the justice process takes quite some time, and there needs to there's a lot of court cases. You have to go back. It's a very long process. And case in point, like the OG community. We have gone to the local courts, we have gone to the regional courts, and we've not yet gone to the international courts, but we have gone to all the court systems that exist, and we are yet to get justice to reclaim back our land. And why am I talking about land in this case? Is that most of the climate solutions are in these indigenous lands and territories, and they are the hub of all the traditional knowledge and all the solutions that we need, most of them. And so it is important for these indigenous peoples to be able to have to be in their home, to practice their own culture, and this culture and traditional practices are sustainable ones. If it's finding sources of energy, there are sustainable ways of doing it, and that's the things that they have been doing. And once back to how I got into it, is that as I said, I went to law school. I wanted to be a champion for justice and to represent my community in getting justice, if it's environmental justice, environmental and land justice specifically. And we have been doing that. And also and my dad is also a strong champion. We do this work together, and we continue to do the work together. He has been a strong mentor and supporter in this journey, and we are hoping that at the end, hopefully soon, we will get land justice and environmental justice, because it has caused a lot of damage, both physically, emotionally, and also to the planet as well, because the evictions has made it seem like they're making us look like we're the ones who have destroyed the forest. And as you all know, that the forests are the biggest carbon sinks, and when there is no forest to be able to, the land will be there'll be no green spaces. And I'm happy to hear that Agmad is doing urban greening, greening urban spaces. So in the rural setup, it's also degrading, and we are working towards ensuring that we have green spaces across at the urban. And urban, that's for Ahmad, but for us, we're working with forest dwelling communities. Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for that. And I'm very sorry to hear. I'm very sorry to hear of your experiences being forced out of your home. It makes me very sad. And at the same time, it also makes me, I don't want to say hopeful or even excited given the circumstances, but it is great to hear that, you found inspiration in the midst of all of this madness. In one of the dialogues, or in one of the conversations that we've had, or one of the conversations that we must always continue having, is that of how people oftentimes are evicted from ancestral lands for the sake of conservation, and how that is a colonial practice. And then we looked at how this also ties into those injustices that are continually being perpetrated by the systems that are supposed to be serving us, but actually don't. So I'm really, really inspired to hear that you have found inspiration to be taking on the work that you are taking on, despite everything that's happened. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for sharing that part of your work and yourself even with us today. And I'll come to you, Ahmed, as well, and just ask you about how you got into the work. How did you get into the space?
Thanks, Michelle. Just a quick comment also on what Cindy was saying and what you were saying now, Michelle, is like, our indigenous peoples, they are really the true custodians of the land, in the sense of the eco warriors, the eco champions, because they've been living with the land for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and this double standards of, hey, it's for conservation, and then tomorrow, can only imagine how heartbreaking it must be to see, trees being logged and just giant trees, or just the forest you once knew being just ripped apart in front of your eyes in the name of conservation. It's like, these double standards. Um, yeah, so something, I grew up in the urban space in Cape Town. So we had, so to say, limited green spaces, also, so to say, the structural design of apartheid that we experienced in South Africa. Some places were more greener than the others, also depending on how close you were maybe living to the mountain also. It's all based off on the color of your skin. And for me, when I went to study, I studied international relations first, and was for the hope of wanting to understand politics, wanting to understand um, history, our history very deeply, for everything to make sense. And then when I moved away from my bachelor, I moved also into the direction of law. I first did a summer school on business and human rights, and that really opened up my eyes to the field of law, and also coming into the spaces of lawyers as well, and really thinking, wow, how can we really challenge the system, and like having some leverage of understanding of law and how that can really benefit us. And then I applied for a master's at a law school, and I was like, oh my word, they accepted me. And it really gave me an opportunity to really understand more. And the school that I studied at was specialized in international humanitarian law, is what kind of laws come into place when there is a war. But my branch that I was focused on is a much more of an interdisciplinary study, and that is called transitional justice and human rights. Now, transitional justice, it comes into place after, like we say, the five unforgivable sins, five great atrocities. I'm referring to apartheid as the crime against humanity, as crimes against humanity, forced disappearance, torture, genocide, etc. How do we deal with the communities? How do we deal with society after that? How do we take a victim-centered approach to move forward? And that is what transitional justice is about. How do we make this transition? How do we include as many voices? How do we give justice to the majority of people that often would feel left out? And when what I was so much fascinated about all these justices that usually get left out. So, like in the context of South Africa, when apartheid came to an end, we had something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where people were giving the truth of what happened, and in exchange, it was perceived, as a kind of a justice. So, so I'm just going on my chain of thought here. Yeah, on justice. So I was very much focused on all these justices that were usually left out, because there's a big, in the human rights, we have social and political rights, and then we get economic, social, and cultural rights on the other side. So the preference has always been given to the political rights. Everybody has to vote, and democracy this and democracy that. And I think also for us as Africans, in an African context, democracy means different. If we look at the African barometer, what does it mean? It's more of like an equal distribution of wealth and resources. That is what we as Africans see as true democracy. So for I was focusing on the social, the economic, ecological, and metaphysical justices. These justices that usually get left out. And I will just touch on what is ecological justice, or what ecological justice means to me. So ecological justice, and in the context of South Africa, it's our ecology, where we are. Why must I, as a university student, still travel, take two taxis and a bus or something just to get to university at 7 o'clock in the morning. The ecology, where are the institutions, where am I based, how the city and the stuff has been structured and designed in a very systematic way to really keep um, the marginalized out of the city and keeping all those um, important and crucial resources in and around the city. So the ecological justice, when I speak about that, and when I speak about the work that Mzansi Organics is doing, ecological justice is how do we bring those resources closer to people? So what I'm looking at and practicing is how do we bring the forests that we find on the mountain, how do we bring that to our township communities? How do we bring that to our Cape Flats? How do we bring that to our marginalized communities? Because that for me makes sense as ecological justice. Because if I'm staying in any of these areas, it would take me quite a mission to get to the start of a hiking trail. It would take me quite a mission to get to the start of a beautiful forest at the foothills of the mountains or something. All this stuff has been designed in such a way for black and brown people in this country to really keeping us out and accessing that. So in the ecological sense, that is the aim of our work, is how do we bring these forests, these indigenous trees, how do we bring them closer to the community so they don't necessarily have to go out to seek it, because they would have it, so to say, in their school, or accessible, in their communities, a forest, and same tree species that you would be finding in the mountain. And we're trying to bring that closer to action. That is our interpretation of really implementing this ecological justice. Then another kind of justice that I was writing so much about, it's called metaphysical justice. And this metaphysical justice is really talking about our brain and how we've been brainwashed and conditioned to accept our circumstances of how the colonial empires designed it for us to be thinking about ourselves. How do we view ourselves as our blackness in our own skin. And that really, when I started to draw a lot of the work of someone called Steve Biko. I really hope you maybe would check him out sometime, in his books and his essays in a beautiful book called I Write What I Like. And for me, I was really drawing about that Black consciousness, that Black empowerment, and how do we really break those mental chains of colonialism that people in our community still have perceived of them, in a mental sense of really boxing ourselves in and saying, no, that's it. This is my circumstances because I'm Black, because I'm brown. That's it for me, and like, how do we really break those mental chains to really empower the Black self to achieve and reach that realization that, hey, I also can do that. I can do whatever I think I can do, and how do we develop that healthy Black consciousness in our communities, in our societies today? Because sadly, that still exists today, these mentalities of, "Ah, no, that's for white people, or that is for this, and also coming, in this green space, and in this green space in South Africa. It's still a very much white dominated space. And when I started to boldly step into the space in lockdown, I came across many white people and lots of old white ladies. Sorry to be talking in so direct racial terms, but this has just been my real experience in South Africa. And it's a very wide space, so to say. It's a very much a privileged thing to be thinking about and be doing, because after you got, because people, the inequality, I'm staying in one of the most unequal cities in the world, one of the most unequal countries in the world, where people who have and people who don't have. So people who don't have, they are wondering, okay, how am I going to get money to go to school tomorrow, or how am I going to get food to feed my family tomorrow, or how am I going to achieve my basic needs first, before we can have, so to say, this luxury of to think about the environment, or because I think it's been often perceived and seen, maybe, as as a privileged topic to be looking at. And when I stepped into the space of this green space in South Africa, I got confronted with with these um, with it being as a white space, I would often be hiding behind my organization and not really revealing myself as like me. I'm the one who actually founded this, and when people actually be meeting me, they'd actually be surprised that I'm not white, and to see the faces, and sometimes people like, oh no, but where's the the boss, where's the boss, and I'm like, hey, boss is here, I mean, I don't call myself boss, but like, just that energy, and like in these spaces of always having to not redefine, but reassert myself, as a brown person, as a black person, in the space of, and owning the space, and owning the narrative, and this brings me to like narrative justice, how do we tell our stories, how do we represent our stories? Because there are many organizations in South Africa who's doing similar stuff to what I'm doing, but yes, they are mainly white owned, but it makes them very disconnected from the actual ground when you are consulting with communities, of actually not being relatable. And that is what we pride ourselves with, is that we pride ourselves to be relatable to people, and when we're trying to take this victim-centered approach, this community-centered approach, how do we really listen to the people first? How do you learn to shut up and listen? How do you really shut up and listen to what's going on to the people? Because people would often come from outside and into these vulnerable communities with the most amazing ideas, the most amazing strategies, ready to implement. But how can you implement if you didn't consult the communities? How can you implement if you didn't actually hear what the struggle is? How can you just implement if you didn't really make space, for people to be heard, to be seen, before you present your great and wondrous ideas? And similar to like when I was setting up Food Forests for African Climate Alliance with the adaptation programs, working in Alsace River and working in Alsace River, for me, it was like always very important, to make the ideas really coming from them, yes, steering the conversations and guiding to certain levels. But when I'm there on the ground with the communities, it's like, hey, I'm following your lead. I'm just, I'm following your lead with, and I'm giving the guidance from my knowledge, but really following your lead. So I came into the space with hi Franklin, nice to meet you. I see Franklin's mic is off. It's it's off now. So I was coming into the space in 2020, after I finished my master's abroad in Switzerland, and coming back to the context of South Africa, and really with a much more healthier Black consciousness. And I think the education really also helped to liberate my own personal mind and help me to more confidently stand into these spaces where you may previously feel intimidated or want to give in to what is seen as, I don't know, the the dominant norm or the narrative. So when I came into the space in 2020, I like recently finished my master's, and I came back and I was in lockdown thinking, so now what I'm going to do? And I laid around, not laid around, but I sat around and pondered, so what am I going to do? And deep down, my passion was always like gardening, and like growing food. It's just like, but on a personal level, like wherever I would be living in the world, I would always have some plants with some garden, growing some spinach or something. And when lockdown happened, that was all I was doing. I was just like in my mom's garden, just like, just gardening and growing food and like having this urge until I had no more space in my mom's garden. I was like, okay, now what? Now what? And then I started to rent a small piece of land in the Odemolan eco village. Because first I was like, oh, I'm going to work so hard for many years, and then I'm going to cash out and buy a farm and live, this green life. But lockdown gave so much pressure to actually say, bro, you might not be alive tomorrow, or we need this now, And I promise you, Michelle, if it wasn't for lockdown, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, because lockdown really gave me that pressure to bring, like, how do I bring my passion of gardening and greening and planting trees? How do I make that into my career? How do I make it? So long story short, I was trying to make the connections between what I studied and what I'm passionate about and how to
Mm.
implement it. And that pressure of lockdown helped me to manifest where I am today.
You're making me slightly nervous because you're going into some of the questions that I have for you later on. And now you've answered all of them. What am I supposed to do? No, I'm only kidding. But thank you so much for going really in depth around how you got into the space, because oftentimes when we think about how practitioners get into the space, sometimes feels unreachable only because the people are already there. Like we know now that Cindy is a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. So sometimes it can be difficult for me to reach the kind of work that a practitioner is doing simply because I don't understand the steps that it's taken to get there. So thank you both for really getting in depth around that. And I think we've heard a little bit about some of the challenges that you're dealing with, and which leads to the solutions that you're implementing from both of you. From Cindy, we mainly heard just kind of in your introduction around even the way that you got into the space, around your experience with being forced off of your land, and then now just going through this whole process, this legal process of making sure that you get it back, or making sure that I'm not entirely sure what the goal is. And I think that is part of the next question, so that we can properly understand how these solutions are addressing those unique challenges faced by that specific community that you work in with, Cindy. So that kind of the question is how, obviously with the context of the work that you do and the solutions that you're implementing, it would be great to also hear some of those solutions that you're implementing. And I'm only realizing now that my questions have now just become 3, so I'll stop there. So the first is, could you just tell us a little bit about, the solutions that you're implementing? And then after we understand some of these solutions, if you can get into how those specific solutions are addressing those unique challenges that are being faced by your community. And I think the third one will just come up. So I leave the floor to you, Cindy.
Thank you, Michelle. And just to just to echo what Akman has said, same with me. Most of my work started with lockdown. I think the movement became stronger once during that time when we were at home. We were all thinking of how do we connect with the land, how do we get back to our roots. So it also started during that time. And now to your question, Michelle. The solution that we are currently implementing as the gig people, and also with various stakeholders working with this community. So I'll start from the policy advocacy side, because that's where my background is. And as I said, we have been going to we've been pursuing the legal process to ensure that we get access, so we can be taken back home. The reason why we want to go back home is that so that we can continue practicing our traditional practices, if it's conserving our biodiversity, if it's responding to the impacts of climate change, if it's conserving our culture, and also it's also our source of livelihood, because if from the land we get access to food. The children will be able to get, once there's food, there's water, there's also access to water, so it's protecting. And this access is not just for the community, and that's the good thing about indigenous communities, that it does not only benefit them, but it benefits everyone. If it's like the Mau Forest, it's one of the largest tropical forests of in Kenya, and meaning it feeds a lot of communities. It's a source of water for many people, and also when there's water, there's of course there's food, and it also, when there's food, there's the poverty. There's no more lack of it's a source of livelihood for most communities, not just the Ogi community. And and so that's the reason why we want to go back and continue doing what we have been doing, and that is protecting our land, protecting our territories, our the forest, the biggest forest that is it's actually a water tower in Kenya. And back to your question on the solutions. So we have been going to we've pursued the legal process. We have gone to the international to the regional court, sorry, the African Court of Human and People's Rights in Arusha, Tanzania. And from there we got we won the case in 2017, and then we went again for the reparations, and we also won that as well. And the court gave a guideline on how they should pay the damages to the Greek community, and both have not are yet to be implemented. And we have been, as a result of the lack of implementation, we have tried the dialogue way. So we want to promote we're trying to promote dialogue between government and the Greek community, having them in these discussions on implementation of the gay case. And if they cannot implement, what is the solution, what can they offer, and how will it benefit the gay community, and also how will it benefit the forest and the home that they claim. So that's what we've been doing, and that has also, it's also a work in progress. And we've also done the marches, the strikes. We have done all that. You'll see us on the news. We have caused all these marches. We've done them as well. That's on the policy side, and we're also we're also doing a lot of advocacy with regards to recognition of indigenous peoples, ensuring that we also get a fair share of if it's, say, budget allocations, if it is resource allocations, if it is any funding opportunities. We're also trying to champion for direct access to these opportunities, because in Kenya, more or less, they normally say that that this percentage will go to communities, indigenous peoples and local communities, but we do not see it trickling down to the communities. So what we're championing for is the direct access to this. We don't want it to have intermediaries. We want to break the intermediaries between these communities. And then so that's on policy and budget advocacy. And now to the practical bit is that the gay community now have a cultural center. So this is a hub. It will be a research hub. It will be a learning hub. It will be a place where the community will be able to learn more about the culture, to learn about the practices, to learn about how about conservation, about restoration of degraded land, of degraded forest. So it's like a repository of it will be a repository of all our traditional knowledge and practices. And this the cultural center is, of course, a joint effort by various partners, indigenous youth. So we've been working. I've been supporting with the indigenous youth beat. There are also elders who are part and parcel of that center. They also go and train on the indigenous language. So all these things they're both tied into conservation and restoration. It's a circle. Our identity, our land, restoration back to its natural state, and also justice, land justice. Yeah, and also we also do agroecology. Now that we do not have a source of livelihood, we have been forced to adapt to the new changes. Now that we no longer have access to food, so we have to do organic farming, which is both good for the planet and good for us. And we're also doing we also since most of the indigenous trees, our traditional herbs, are getting lost, we have an organic herbarium, which houses all these things. So we are trying to ensure that nothing gets lost, and that we will be able to teach, we'll be able to save this for the current generation and also for the generations to come. And that's the reason why we are also, I'm also working with specifically girls, young adolescent girls, to ensure that we're training them. Actually, the trainings that we normally have, we do them at the cultural center so that they can see it for themselves, and that they'll be able to practice it and understand the reason why we are championing for justice. We're championing for environmental and land justice, and also climate justice as well. To have firsthand experiences, because they've seen it for this, they've seen it for themselves. During the work that we do, is that we also try to, we never call it capacity building. We say that we are learning from communities. They know the changes that is happening in the environment, and they know what to do. So during our dialogues with communities, our trainings with communities, we try and encourage, we try and call it a knowledge and learning exchange instead of capacity building, because they know everything. We're just there to facilitate the dialogue and help them find the solutions to this, to the crisis. And for us, it is using our traditional knowledge to solve the world's problems. I didn't get the second question. If you could repeat it, please.
It's okay. It's okay, because I also just got lost in that answer, and I think it should have covered that second part of the question, which is great. And I was, just soon after you would have sort of wrapped up that thought, I would have now announced to the room that we are halfway through our dialogue already. I know time flies when you're having fun, or at least when you're having learning experiences like we are. But I quite like what you said around those dialogues and just changing the languaging that we use. Because even if we were to say, I mean, I'll give an example of the title for today's dialogue being strategies for developing and implementing climate solutions. It's very wordy, it's very dense. Someone might not necessarily know that the kind of conversation we're having is relevant to them because of the languaging used. And so I took that away from when you were actually speaking about that dialogue and not calling them capacity buildings, but actually learning experiences, which is wonderful, because I think it also challenges everyone in the room to challenge how they use languaging to communicate, like the work that they do. So I had opened, and for others who are interested in asking direct questions to our panelists, I do see there's 2 questions already in the chat, which is amazing. I will read them out to the panelists. But if you do have any more questions, please do ask them. We are in sort of like the Q&A session, where it's not so much a dialogue between me and the 2 of them, but you can also kind of get really, really involved. And the first question that we saw here is, in what ways can we ensure that climate solutions are locally relevant and sustainable? And I think I'll start with Ahmed, because the following question is directed to you, Cindy. So we'll get to that when you can address it. But Ahmed, what ways can we ensure that climate solutions are locally relevant and sustainable?
Hi, thanks for the question, which come from Vincent. Thanks for being a part of the conversation. So one way I strongly believe, it comes with you being a local resident, you living there or in your community, in your area, you firsthand know the situations that are happening, what is happening, right? To ensure that the solutions are locally relevant and sustainable, I think it also, when it not only comes from you, but when it also comes from the other people around your community, so if you're proposing these questions in your community from yourself, answering it yourself and seeing it, because one, you're a local resident and you can, see what is going on. And then what you could do is just speaking with people around you, on what resonates with them, what do they feel, and then to find the solutions. There are many different solutions that we could look at adapting, and I don't know what may be the situation that you see in your community, Vincent, that is like, really speaking to you. But for finding the solutions, it's I think it's really looking towards what is already being done, what is out there, whether it is pollution, whether we're making eco bricks, or whether we are, you know, the solutions of really looking what other people are doing, and then trying to see how we can adapt that into our context, and making it locally relevant and sustainable. It's by really getting, because we can't do these things alone. And when we're working in our community or in other communities, we really need, in that word, community, we need the people from around it to help us to make it sustainable. Because many times when we do things, we cannot just implement something and then maybe disappear, and believe, everything is going to be fine, it's going to grow, but it's about really checking in, with the communities, checking on things, how things are going, after things are being implemented, and really opening ourselves up, to all the many solutions that are out there and seeing how we can adapt that to our context specifically.
Thank you for that. Nondumiso, I do see your hand. I'll give you an opportunity to ask your question just after Cindy has answered the question that's been asked. I also see that Dennis in the chat decided to also chime in and answer that question around what ways we can ensure climate solutions are locally relevant and sustainable. And Dennis says, by educating and encouraging people on the effects of climate change. For example, if deforestation is undermined, there will be more benefits maybe on agriculture. So if we really speak about the negatives of deforestation, then we'll probably see more benefits from an agricultural perspective. So thank you so much for engaging with that. Cindy, the question to you is there a gap between the community and the government? And what are you doing to minimize the gap?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Michelle. And just to add to the question that was asked, I think we first need to we need to make communities understand what is at stake, what are we losing, and to also make them think beyond today and what will happen tomorrow. Like in 10 years' time, what do you want to see? What do you want your generation to see, if any? So that's those are my few thoughts. And to the question on whether there's a gap between the community and the government, there is no gap, because the court case in itself has bridged this gap, because the government is now forced to dialogue with the gay community. They're forced to know the existence of the community. They already knew the existence, but with the court case and going from the local level to the national level and now to the regional level, has been able to encourage dialogue, because no government wants a case against them in court. They want to settle it as soon as possible. And the government has tried to their level best to engage the community in various platforms, if it is having them to have focal persons at the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, to have them involved, to even consult them when they're doing some of their work. Of course, this is something that needs to be improved again, but that I think they have. The gap is no longer there. It used to be there maybe 10 years ago, but now they recognize the community, not not formally, but informally they do know that we exist. They know that we have a case. They know that they need to implement the case, and they also know that that the people are the caretakers of the forest. There's various research that has been done by even ministry officials of the national government and also at the county level. So there is data. They wouldn't say that there's no data on existence of the community. And also at the international level as well, we are well recognized. We even have most of our allies are from international organizations. We have countries, other indigenous communities from across Africa and globally add their voice to championing for justice, climate justice, land justice, environmental justice for the good community. So those are some of the things that we have been doing, and we also we encourage, as I said during my submission, is that we have been encouraging dialogue. We want to work with the government to implement this case. But if it fails, we also try other avenues of pushing them to implement and doing more advocacy, having championing for more funding to go to our work to ensure that to amplify our voices. And I think I can go ahead. I've seen another question on agroecology related to my presentation. Would you consider agroecology a climate solution to poverty in the villages? Yes, I would think yes, it is. It is a climate solution because in these villages it is where the original seeds, that's where the hub of our indigenous seeds are. That's where the original farmers are. So it's once we encourage this agroecology in the villages, they'll be able to use it to sell them, and to also even create seed banks to purchase indigenous seeds, to encourage the use of indigenous seeds, and to avoid the using of this improvised, for lack of a better word, the improvised seeds, and to also encourage people to be eating organic food and to avoid the use of chemicals, such like things. I do think it is a solution to poverty because it will be a source of livelihood for these villages, and it will also, once there's food, I think food is very critical in the African setup, and I think not even in the African setup, but everywhere. When there's food, there will be more. There'll be more money. There'll be the caretakers of the household will have more capacity to look for more ways of for creating more sources of livelihoods for themselves and also for the community and their families. So it is a solution, and I would highly encourage you and anyone else to practice agroecology. Thanks, Michelle.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then just going ahead and answering that second one. It's great. I'm trying so much not to engage with your answers, so forgive me. But Nondumi, so the floor is yours. You had your hand raised.
Oh, hi, thank you very much. My name is Nondumi. So I am a documentary filmmaker based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I wanted to type my question, but I wanted to give context and it was just getting a bit long. So pardon me. I'm currently making a documentary. It's a nature conservation story about a small community who had their land stolen under the 1913 Act, which prohibited Black people in South Africa from occupying or owning land. However, with the new constitution, there is an act called the Land Restitution Act, which is aims to facilitate the giving back of land to people, communities, families whose land was stolen. So this community, whose story I'm telling, they've basically gone through that process and they've gotten their land back. And right now they're actively in the process of conserving the land. And the chief who leads this community is really active and passionate about this work that he's doing, his own awards and everything. So my question is, actually, I'm looking for ideas because I'm about to start filming in the next few weeks. However, I don't want this to be just a documentary that, I make and that's it. I am starting to think around my impact campaign and what practical solutions can we give when we screen this film, because we want to screen in different rural communities and schools, but I don't want to just get there and screen and answer a few questions and leave. I would like to design a sort of like a workshop that we can do with the students or community members, and basically just give practical solutions for everyday conservation. And yeah, so I don't know if anyone has got any ideas around that, because I do not really come from the space of climate justice, conservation, or anything like that.
I'm not entirely sure if I missed your question, but I'm not sure. Cindy, I see you are not, your video is on. So can you indicate whether you caught that question?
I didn't quite get it. I just
All right.
yeah, but it would be nice if she could paraphrase it.
Yes,
So
please, Nondumiso, just that question part.
my question basically is that because my film is about nature conservation, and when I screen this film, I would like to also offer workshops that offer practical solutions to the different communities that we'll be visiting and schools. If you have any ideas on, what type of solutions that we could offer, because I'm not from the space of conservation, so I'm still reading up, but I'm not really sure what is something that, or some of the solutions that we could give that would have a long-lasting impact on the day-to-day solutions and practical solutions on how to contribute to conserving the environment.
All right. I think I did catch the question. And you'll forgive me for this, Nondumi. So part of the work that we do at the African Climate Alliance aligns with part of the question that you've now given. So I'm going to ask my colleague Gabriel, who's in the room with us, to maybe give an answer to that in the chat if it's possible. Only because I know that it can become a lengthy process of process and step 1 and step 2 and step 3. So please allow me to do that.
I'd like privately and chat further also.
All right, no problem. We'll give you our details, and then we can take the conversation further. Thank you so much for reaching out and then just asking your question. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. Yeah, so I will ask a few more questions. Or at least just one in the chat that I can see to both of you, because I'm also now just becoming very aware of the time. Again, time flies when you're having fun. So the next question is, how can we promote sustainable land management practices that respect the rights and interests of Indigenous peoples and other local communities? And how do we ensure that these communities are meaningfully engaged? So I'll start with you, Ahmed. And then Cindy, if you've got anything to add to that question in terms of answering, then we'll also give it to you. So Ahmed?
Thank you for the question. And I'm actually going to answer the question with some experience, almost like a little bit of a case study with one Indigenous community that we've been working with in South Africa, with one of the Khoi groups. And we've been working with them for about, almost over 2 years now. So with sustainable land practices and to really continuously meaningfully engage with the community, as this community has land, but they didn't, so to say, really know what to do with the land and how to really move the land forward. And one thing I can really say and really cannot emphasize enough is how education and workshops can really change people and people's lives. So one of the elders from this community, Elder Dina, you'll see on some of our TikTok videos and so on. So Elder Dina, she's like one of the main persons in the kraal there. We sent her to a course at Seed where with one of our other partners. You know, I always talk about Seed to you, Michelle. I always rave to you about them. So we sent her to one of these intensive programs. We got it in and so on. And I tell you, when she came back, and this is again, you know, it's not a young person. She was already in her 60s, you know, if not older. And how the education really empowered her. Because when she came back, she was like so full of so full of knowledge that she learned on how to grow food, how to be sustainable, how to make your own fertilizer, how to save your seeds, how to care for the soil, how to mulch, how to do all these different things. I tell you, every time, every visit back to the kraal would be like, oh wow, Aldetina's busy here, she's busy there. It's like the evidence is like was absolutely clear, you know, of what she learned during that. It was a 3-week program also only. It was only 3 weeks, but how that 3-week program that introduced her to permaculture design, how it introduced her to, you know, these practices, how it really empowered her at her age also. And now that she has that knowledge, not only is she implementing it, but she's also teaching other people from her communities. So on that point, I would say like really find out where are the schools of learning in your communities that are doing these kind of practices. For all of you in Kenya, we got an East African Climate Alliance, our alliance in East Africa. It's an organization. I'm gonna put it here. It's called Miti Alliance. And I would really strongly recommend you to check out Miti Alliance if you are in East Africa, because they are one of the organizations there that are teaching people how to grow food and to be sustainable and so on. And really seek out those those organizations in your communities, familiarize yourself with their programs, and attend those programs, and of course encourage people who you think would benefit from these programs to attend it. Because even myself, you know, I learned as I went along, you know, through the years, and we can all learn, and it's never ever too late to learn on how to grow seeds, how to grow trees, how to grow fruit and so on. So keep learning, watch YouTube videos, find people who are doing it in your communities, meet with them, and don't be shy. You know, if you find someone on social media or whatever that is really moving and inspiring you, write them a message. And I've done that before in my progress as well with Mzansi Organics and using social media to leverage. I would literally write people and say, oh my God, I really like what you're doing. I'd like to come visit you or something, you know, and I would make that effort to meet these people. And people would also write to me also, like this permaculture school who we sent Albert, you know, they wrote me because they were like, hey, we see you, we like what you're doing, like we want to meet you. And I was like, cool, I'm going to come and I'm going to meet you. So when those opportunities come to meet people in these spaces, go and take that effort, go meet the people, and reach out to other organizations, whether it's social media or via email or phone call. There's even a guy in Kenya, because I was doing seed balls in 2020, 2021. I was experiencing, and this guy was doing seed balls in Kenya. And I was looking like, who did this before me? And I was like, oh my word, there's this guy like in Kenya, he's doing this amazing work. I'm gonna reach out to him. And I reached out to him, and he responded to me. And I'm telling you, 90% to 98% of the time, you would get a response, you know, and you'd get a dialogue going, you get a conversation going, and you can start exchanging knowledge and implementing with the best practices. Because sometimes we have amazing ideas, and then we can actually find that there are other people who's actually done it already. So look for people who's doing it also, and reach out to them, connect with them, and keep on learning.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Ahmed. Cindy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Just stuff. I don't really have anything to add, but just to add a little bit is that something else is just to sit down with your grandmother. Sit down with your grandmother or your if you can find not really your grandmother but an elder in your community to story tell of how they used to live life, because we're adapting to the new age, but we also need to merge the two knowledge systems. If it's the knowledge systems of our grandmother, and also with the things that we find on the internet, with the scientific bit of it. So we need to merge these two sciences to find a solution. That also works.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think oftentimes when we do speak about solutions and like implementing things and like working on things, a lot of the times we think it's supposed to be implied. So when we say indigenous knowledge, we do think it's supposed to be implied, or at least I do. So making it clear that we have places and people that we can access for indigenous knowledge and ways of engaging them. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. Considering we have about 10 minutes left, what I'm going to do, and you will both forgive me for this because I do get like this when it's closer to the end, is I'll give you 2.5 minutes each to answer the following questions. So, right, I see one of the questions has already been answered. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for getting on that around how we can measure the success and impact of climate solutions at the local level, because we try as much as possible to work at the local level. So thanks for jumping on that. And the question I want to ask both of you is, considering the urgency of the climate crisis, how can we, right, even as practitioners, even as activists, as people who are getting involved in the fight for justice, environmental justice, and justice as a whole, considering the urgency of the climate crisis, how can we accelerate the development and implementation of effective climate solutions in the global south? So across different communities, not so much only specific to the communities that both of you work in. So how can we accelerate that development and implementation of effective climate solutions in the global south or in Africa? And maybe I can start with you, Cindy, and then move to Ahmed.
Yeah, that's a heavy question. So how we can accelerate, if I got your question right, you're asking how we can accelerate development of please repeat, of the climate solutions
Yes.
across.
So how can we accelerate implementation, development as well as implementation? So maybe let me say effective implementation, because we don't just want to be implementing any kinds of solutions, but how can we accelerate or foster that environment of developing solutions that make sense for our context, that we can then implement or that we can then practice to bring proper climate solution related results? So how can we do that whole process in an effective way?
I think the first thing, of course, when you're looking for solutions to any problem, is co-creation. So it's co-creating these solutions with communities, any community at all. If you're implementing it in, say, Kenya, you need to co-create the solution with Kenyans, with representatives from all sectors, with so there needs to be an inclusive co-creation process with say women, young people, with people with disabilities, with all these groups, so ensure that you're co-creating this solution. We also want to avoid an instance where we are imposing solutions on communities and we do not know the priorities of these communities. And mostly in the work that I do, I always encourage people to do vulnerability assessments before implementing any solution in any area. You first need to identify which group is more vulnerable. Is it the women, are the women more vulnerable? Are young people more vulnerable? Are the men more vulnerable? And what are the priority areas for these communities? Because we don't want to we don't want to impose a solution on a community and yet it's not their priority. I'll give an example of another project in the coastal region where they went and built toilets for the community, and yet the problem was food. So we don't want to solve, we don't want to impose solutions on a community, and yet we don't know what they really want. Do they want, is their priority food or water? Is their priority health, or is it food? So we first need to make this to make this community understand that climate is one, climate is it's a problem, and we need to now sit down together with all these groups and find the right solutions. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I think that does answer that question. And so, Ahmed, I'll ask you to answer the same question. Urgency of the climate crisis. How can we accelerate the development and implementation of effective climate solutions in the global south?
Cool. I'm going to answer this question also in line with the question that was reposted by Tamara, I see. Okay, let me not sound too radical, but we need to stop waiting for the government. We need to stop thinking that the government is going to come and help us and that they have the answers or the best answers for us. And just tying in with what Cindy was also saying is the community readiness assessment is also very important, to make sure that what you're doing and what you're implementing is the best thing for the community that we're dealing with. And then when I say moving away from government, because we know, Michelle, and how can we really accelerate this? We do need money. And I'm not going to hide away from that, but we need money to achieve these beautiful ideas that we would like to achieve. To make these things really a reality, we need to have access to funding and access to money. And often, well, in my experience, just speaking from my experience of not waiting for the government, we need to see how can we tap into the private sector. How do we make the private sector accountable? How do we make these big corporates accountable for what they are doing with why we're in the situation in the first place, right? And how do we tap into those resources and those funding to achieve it? Because with money, with funding, we will be able to implement these great and amazing ideas that are already out there. And that is how I believe that we can strongly accelerate with urgency, in a sustainable way, with correct funding.
Amazing. Thank you both for that. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our dialogue. I very much dislike this part because it means we're cutting the conversation and we're no longer having it. But I think before we say goodbye, it would be amazing to just maybe in one line hear from both of our panelists. If we can hear in just one line, and I know it's very tough, it's always extremely difficult when I do this to people, and I do apologize. But in one line, what would you say to someone who is in the process of trying to develop and implement a climate solution in their context? So maybe a one-line summary. What would you say to someone who is going on that journey or who's already on that journey? I'll start with you, Ahmed, and then Cindy, I'll give you to close us off.
So I will say, first of all, get out of your head, get up and do it. Like, stop waiting, work with what you have. If you are healthy and fit and you got 2 hands and 2 feet, get up, don't waste time, do something, do more and talk less, and start with where you are and with what you have, and do something and believe and know that your little action is going to have a ripple effect, and this ripple effect is going to be part of the tidal wave of change that we need.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Cindy?
I'll just remind the person who I'll assume I'm talking to Michelle. I'll tell Michelle to remember who you're doing it for. You're not doing it for yourself. You're doing for the generations to come. You're doing it for many, not even, let's say, like 3 generations to come, and you need to be the change. They need to remember that Michelle did that. I'm here because of Michelle. This forest is here because of Michelle. I'm eating this food because Michelle decided to speak up. She decided to amplify her voice and to also work with her community, and there's no more injustices because of Michelle. So you need to think about that, and also remember and have it at the back of your mind to always ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both for spending your evening with us and really going into this conversation around strategies and implementing them, and then really giving us like practical things that both of you are getting involved in, just in terms of fighting and working toward justice. Because in the climate justice space, there's no one way to fight for justice. So I really do appreciate both of these perspectives that have come out. Thank you so much to both of you. We really do appreciate the time that you've spent with us. And before we dismiss everyone, just a few more like administrative things, and I'll start with just this one. Do not go unless you've done this. I know some people have been asking for contact details. Our contact details are now on screen. So you can email us, the education team, education@africanclimatealliance.org. But if you have any other general inquiries, like non-Dumiso, please email team@africanclimatealliance.org. Alternatively, you can visit us at africanclimatealliance.org. That is our website. The data reimbursement form I'm going to pop in the chat. Please make sure to fill it out. If you are going to claim back data, please do it tonight or latest tomorrow night. If you do it after that, unfortunately, we won't be able to reimburse you because we only can do it within a specific amount of time. One other thing, please fill out the form with the name that you registered for the session with. If you do not do that, we will not know who you are. So like my name is Michelle. If I pop into the meeting with Michelle, but on the form, I write my middle name. If it's Cindy doing the data, she won't know who that person is. So please try as much as possible to stick to your name when you fill out these forms, just for uniformity. If you don't do that, we will not know who you are. So please. I've seen some questions. Great. I see people are exchanging contacts in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. And the data form I am popping now. Please make sure you fill it out and you have it before we say goodbye. Simon, the form is now in the chat. Please just confirm that you have seen it. Anyone, just a thumbs up would be great. Awesome. Thanks, Cindy. So it's in the chat. Please make sure you do fill it out. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And have a great evening, everyone.